Dr. Yev Agus Falcha, hi and welcome. It's John O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School, and today I'm answering a community question which we kind of get asked, oddly enough, we get asked it in a number of different ways at different times, depending on what work we're doing and how that work seems to impact on people. And so the question really most recently kind of put forward in an email from Tom in Waterford or Hammersmith is the fact that, do we need to rebrand our school? And so to jump right to the answer to that question, no, we don't. But I think I need to kind of talk about definition. And that's one thing that we do touch on, and I like to touch on in my teaching here at our Pagan School, is definition, because I'm a bard. You know, I know the power of words. I know how important it is to use the right words and how harmful and damaging some words can be. So with that kind of awareness and that kind of conscientious approach to the language that I use, to the way and also the purposes for which I use the power of words, it's very important to be able to manage that appropriately and responsibly. And so definition is how I like to do that. So you might find me kind of starting off any of the classes in the Irish Pagan School by defining my understanding or the generally accepted understandings of particular words, be it offerings or tribe or prayer. There are kind of these words that we use very commonly. They become part of our regular vernacular. They become part of our standard kind of conversations all of the time in spiritual circles, in kind of pagan circles. But if we don't take the time to actually, touch on at least sometimes this concept of definition, then there could be stuff getting lost in translation. If I talk about the word priest, for example, in a certain kind of cultural context, that is a devotee, a pastoral care, someone who looks after kind of their community. In an Irish historical kind of circumstance, it brings up other not very unsavory circumstances of child abuse, harassment, and sexual abuse, all of which being covered up by the organism of the Catholic Church and their representations in the country, which is the priest. Now, not all priests. I have known many kind of priests, and actually a couple of Franciscan friars who are absolutely solid legend individuals, but it doesn't mean that there isn't a culture of canon law superseding like human law, which was actually, interestingly enough, there was, thanks to the Gdpr, which was a European kind of agreement or legal agreement, it is illegal for any company based or who holds premises or runs a company in some way based in Europe to retain your private information, your name, your address, etc., without your consent. So you can contact these companies and say, sorry, can you remove me from your lists? Which is very important to do because consent is very important. And so when the GDPR was passed, a lot of us, pagan people who had come to our life later on in paganism and were raised with Catholicism, said, well, actually, the Vatican is a country based in Rome, which is based in Italy, based in a city, Rome, based in a country, Italy, and Italy is in Europe. And Italy is a member of this kind of legal circumstances. And though the Vatican is a separate country, it's still a country in Europe. And so surely by GDPR rules of law, we should be able to have our names removed from their lists, their baptismal lists, etc. Me and a number of people pursued that through bishops and through dioceses. And eventually the response we got was no, because canon law supersedes national law or European law. Essentially, they hold their own laws above any other laws, because the laws of their God supersede any kind of laws that we might want to put in place, which I have opinions on. But it's that idea of priesthood. It's that idea of, okay, I am getting off track and I'm aware of that, so I will kind of pull it back a little bit. But when we talk about, if we don't take a moment to talk about this concept of priesthood in awareness of cultural difference, in awareness of experiential difference, then we are missing some fundamental parts of definition that could lead us to a better understanding, a better conversation and dialogue. And this is kind of what we kind of get stuck on sometimes. And it is this matter of definition. And people have contacted us over time and told us that we are not pagan, or we're not Irish, or what we do is not Irish paganism, or some facet of our teaching, some part of us as individuals is not Irish paganism, or not appropriate for kind of the worship of Irish gods. And it's like, okay, well, that's their opinion, and of course everyone's entitled to an opinion, everyone has an opinion, but in the same concept everyone has an asshole. So I don't know, does that count as bad words? These aren't flagged for kids anyway. But that's where we kind of get stuck sometimes, and this idea of definition. So we have this kind of concern presented to us about, we're not Irish paganism, or, our kind of school, we're not kind of teaching proper kind of paganism, or we're not teaching proper kind of Irish culture. And a lot of the times, though, the people who are raising this concern about our branding are people who aren't Irish, or people who aren't in the culture, or people who, were raised with a different experience. And we're not the only teachers out. Okay, all right. Yes, the Irish Pagan School was founded in a very absence of other kind of formalized teaching structures. And that was it. That was one thing Laura and I looked at, and we're like, actually, we both see a gap here. We both wish we had better resources out there. We both wish we had access to more information, or culturally sensitive information, or information that's not been appropriated and kind of sold back to us by people who don't actually understand the cultural nuance of the landscape or the history of Ireland. And so that's where it came from. That's where we're like, okay, well, actually our deities were involved as well. Hands on table, they were like, yeah, it's a shame no one can do better at that. Yeah, be careful what you wish for, especially when you have gods and goddesses listening attentively. Anyway, so I'm going to break down the definition of the Irish Pagan School. That's what we're going to do. We're going to, the Irish Pagan School is 3 words: Irish, pagan, and school. So the first we're going to touch on is the middle word, pagan. So what is pagan? Pagan is not a singular form of spiritual worship. It is an umbrella term to define many different types of religious practices, spiritual paths, particular followings. Pagan is used as a collective overall term to help give some definition about these forms of spirituality, because all of these different paths have a couple of fundamental things in common, i.e. a reverence for nature, the environment in which we live, the planet upon which we exist. All pagan, the other thing, one of the other cornerstones of paganism is a belief in polytheism, that there are multiple gods, and that there are multiple different gods in multiple different countries and multiple different experiences of deity in a multitude of different ways. And so the third kind of area is that all of these spiritual practices involve some form of meditation or introspection as a basic part of the path, the spiritual path that is being followed. So that's what paganism is. It's not just one particular flavor of ice cream. It is every type of possible potential ice cream that might exist. And that's my analogy, really. It is not just the one pure vanilla ice cream that helps define this form of spirituality. It's entirely different, and it can be expressed in so many different ways based on, again, the planet and the environment in which a person grows up. Someone growing up in Ireland, for example, gets a couple of weeks of sunshine a year, and then a lot of rain and a lot of green, a lot of wetness. So it would make sense that we don't have specifically solar-based deities. Whereas someone growing up in Egypt, the culture that was raised in, being a much more kind of bright or kind of arid climate, it's going to have a much more connected, maybe, experience in regards to sunshine. And this is where I'm going to catch myself. Because I don't fucking know. I honestly don't fucking know. Paganism is experienced by a variety of different individuals in a variety of different worlds. There are different locations in our world and different cultures in our world. But my paganism is based in my country, is based on my experiences, based on the environment in which I've been raised, and based on the gods and deities that exist in my nation, my island, my kind of country. And so that's where I'm going to move into the second point of definition, which is Ireland, Irish. All of the expressions of spirituality and my particular like path of paganism worship and follow the Irish gods. I have a tattoo on my wrist of the magical items associated with Untitled. I have sworn myself to his practice, to his service, and a big part of that is turning up and talking about him every day. You know, he's an Irish deity. He's an Irish god. You don't find the Dagda. He may have travelled. If you saw my video on how the Dagda got his club, he travelled. He left Ireland. He went out and around to try and find the power to bring his child back to life. But he's still a very Irish god. And that's where we get this kind of confusion. I've touched on it a little bit in other videos as well. This kind of Days Pater, this kind of Sky Father, as referenced by Julius Caesar, as he tried to look at all the different pantheons of gods all around, you know, the Celtic Europe, or as he kind of pitched it, like, you know, Gaul, which is France, Germania, Germany, on all those kind of broader areas, coming across as far as, you know, Britannia, or early kind of, actually, yeah, they used to call it Hibernia, is the Roman name for Ireland, because it was this land of eternal winter, which tickles me. But sidetrack, back on point. Yeah, there's you can't just say, just because one thing looks like another thing, that they are the same thing. And there's a deity over in France called Succulus, and Succulus is this kind of very broad, very big, very powerful kind of, you know, deity who is linked with the sky, but he's also linked with blacksmithing, and he's known as the good striker, and he has like this hammer, and one of the other symbols for him is a wheel. Now, you might say that one of the Dagda's names, which I will cover in another video, Tree Carboid Koch, which is, you know, a three-wheeled chariot. You know, it's similar, like the Dagda has the club, Succulus is a hammer, so maybe it's the same thing. No, absolutely not. There's different cultural nuances there. There's different kind of national, and not even national, just like environmental impacts that of the people who experience deity in that area that makes them different. And so it's Irish for me because I'm Irish. I worship and practice on the island of Ireland. I revere the landscape, the environment of the land in which I grow, which is Ireland. One of the other things that we also get, though, is that, you know, Irish paganism shouldn't involve politics, or, like, you know, spiritual path shouldn't involve politics. I was like, well, no, it should. Because again, you know, your practice and your spirituality is inherently informed by the culture and where you're raised. The culture and where you're raised is inherently informed by the nation in which you live and the landscape upon which you live. The nation in which you live and the landscape in which you live is informed by the geopolitical status of your country and those who in power run it, and the decisions that are made there. You can't just, like, you know, separate one thing. You can't just pull that apart and say, well, no, I don't believe in politics, so I don't like to talk about it. You know, that's someone who hasn't got enough of a passion, maybe, an informed opinion, maybe, enough of a fear, maybe, of the impact of power structures on them in their own life. And so, yeah, your spirituality should be political. There should be some element, because that informs you as an individual, and your experience of your spirituality is what you exist in as life and your paganism. So when we talk about Ireland, so much of the spiritual trauma that has been done to Ireland over the last 300, 400, 600, the 800 years, can only be processed through the lens of looking at the impact that's been done to us as a colonized country. And I'm talking specifically about colonization here. I'm not talking about like the syncretic blend of cultures coming in. Like the early stories, the Lergabala Aaron, all these tribes come in and they merge, they intermingle, they become like a new people. Like the very early Anglo-Saxons who came over, and then the very early Normans who came over, they integrated with the people. They adopted Irish fashion, and Irish fashion became the height of fashion because of how forward it was in regards to the colors that could be made or the fabrics that could be done and the hairstyles, you know. So there was this kind of well-known thing that they became more Irish than the Irish themselves. And it is that kind of beautiful amalgamation of cultures as they kind of merge together and become something new, become something growing from there, you know. Um, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the eradication of the Irish culture, the eradication of the Irish language and ancient spiritual practices that was done to us. And so you can't separate that. You know, I can't claim to be Irish and not be aware of the impact of political powers on my country. I can't claim to be Irish and turn a blind eye to the harm that is done on the island by the fact that, you know, we do have a hard border. Well, thankfully not a hard border. Fuck you, Brexit. But there is a border between the Northern Ireland and the Southern Ireland because of all of the pain and all of the hurt that was done there. As a spiritually sensitive person, there are places on this country where I can't go without like feeling very sick, very kind of turned up, very emotional, because of the harm that still is remembered in the landscape. So, okay, I'm gonna pack my emotions away a little bit. You got to feel your feelings. Like, them's not my rules. That's Dag the rules, because the only way to actually process your feelings is to feel them. And far too many males, pre-programmed males like myself, were told to not feel their feelings, and that leads to a lot of repression and a lot of toxic and hurt mentality and an inability to actually express emotion healthily. I touched on that in another video about the harm that is done to males by males, by repressing emotion, and then the significant harm that happens to females because of that. I think it was actually that video that caused the most recent concern about, well, you're not Irish paganism, or what you're talking about isn't Irish paganism. I'm sorry, I was talking about the hurt and harm in Ireland because of the murder of another young woman in Ireland by toxic male patriarchy bullshit. That's Irish. That is part of our responsibility as people in Ireland. That is part of our you know, impact on us as males in Ireland. It is a problem within our society, within our nation, within our gender, within that nation. How can that not be Irish? And I'm a pagan. And I express myself through my spirituality. I find my solace in my spirituality. I find my power and my ability to speak responsibly through my spirituality. So I'm an Irish pagan talking about Irish pagan and talking about Ireland and talking about spiritual practices and talking about how I actually did a presentation at a conference about how paganism could be a solution and a movement and a stepping stone towards healthy masculinity in our world. Again, because paganism involves reverence for nature and environment around you, a belief in a polytheism circumstance, multiple deities who kind of connect and, you know, guide us in multiple different ways, but then also fundamentally meditation and introspection. What is it that everyone needs a bit of fucking time of? Meditation and introspection. How do we kind of grow and be better people? How do we kind of assess ourselves and kind of make sure that we're not like wrecking ourselves, that we are actually checking ourselves before we do that? How can we be better in ourselves, for ourselves, and then for our community, and then for our family and everyone else around us, if we're not taking time to be introspective? Rant. That's why I think that, yes, paganism as a spirituality could be a healthy solution for this toxic masculine issue that we have going on in our world. But I can't speak for the world. All I can do is speak for Ireland and my experience that happens here, because that's the other side of it, you know. Moving into the definition of school. What is a school? It is a place where people gather to learn stuff. It is a place where teachers present information and students kind of connect with that information and improve themselves. We have a whole lot of classes presented by a number of different Irish people, Irish folklorists, Irish spirituals, Irish engineers, who happen to be Bridget people. That's the Inbox class and the Bridget, kind of working with Bridget course at the moment. Myself as an Irish man, and my partner Laura O'Brien as an Irish woman, as a Morrigan person and as a Dagda person. Like, all of that information is taught in classes. So it's a school. I don't think you could define it as anything else. And thankfully, I'm very, very grateful to some of the reviews we get. There are people who have actually commented on some of our courses and have found that they got a better experience from our courses than they did paying for a third level education in some other institution. I'm humbled by that. I'm delighted by that. So that shows that we're actually running as an education organization. That's what we actually do. That is the definition of what we do. So we're a school. We're pagans, and the topics that we cover in the school are pagan specific topics from, mythology, folklore, spirituality, all of that kind of stuff. And all the topics are actually based in Irish history, mythology, Irish spirituality, based about the Ireland and the gods and guardians and guides of Ireland. And, that would make it Irish, right? Presented by Irish people on topics that are Irish, hosted in Ireland, about pagan stuff. That's a school. So no, I don't think we need to change our branding. I think people need to understand, or maybe reassess, or take some introspective time with their own definitions and their own preconceived circumstances. Because I'm not going to teach, a Greek person about their mythology. I'm not going to teach a Roman person about, or an Italian person about their mythology. I'm not going to teach, American people about First Nation mythology. All of that is appropriation. And the best I can do if I touch on anything that is outside of my own wheelhouse, is to approach it appreciatively, to kind of direct people to native resources there. Okay, if you want to know about this, can I find a native resource that can teach you about your own culture, about your own country, about your own spirituality? And again, you don't have to be Irish to experience Irish spirituality. You don't have to have DNA blood coding, or be a descendant of, Brian Boru or any Irish person ever to experience Irish spirituality. It's not about your DNA. It's not about your blood. It's not about the color of your skin, the color of your hair. It's not about your financial status. It's not about your surname. It's not about the family you married into or escaped out of. It's about none of that. It's about yourself. It's about you as a person who exists in this world, and what connects with you in the right way. And then how you approach it appreciatively, not appropriately, but not appropriatively. So are we changing our branding? No, we're not. We're talking about Ireland, and we're Irish people talking about Irish pagan existence in our world. And we're teaching about that in classes in a school environment. So we are the Irish pagan school. There's one other area that we do come across this, which is our community spaces. We are delighted to host a number of different community spaces in social media. There's the Irish Pagan School community. There's the Dagda's Hearth. There's the Morrigan's Cave. There's an Om Journeys kind of private group. There's Irish Magic and Spirituality. And all of those things, all of those groups are very well moderated. They're intentionally very well moderated, because a lot of those spaces exist for the students of the school to be able to connect with each other, to kind of process through their experiences of the classes that they take, to try and process through their experiences of the journey work that they follow, to try and connect and to be part of a community, a global community that experiences our content in the Irish Pagan School. Now, we do get told we're too strict, we're gatekeeping. Why are you restricting me from expressing myself in these groups? Well, there are rules, there are guidelines. There are umpteen different generic pagan, millions of possibly generic pagan groups out there. We're trying to have an Irish focused group, or a Morrigan focused group, or a Dagda focused group. So why should we, allow it to be generically pagan? That's not restricting anyone. That's not kind of stamping down on their right to express themselves. They can express themselves wherever they want to, in whatever way they want to, within the guidelines of the space that we're holding. It's our responsibility as a school to try and provide additional resources for those who kind of come to us for our teaching experiences. And I can't personally sit down with every single student and give that aftercare or give that kind of support or kind of check in with them on their experience of the class. What we have done instead is we have built a community of people who will peer-to-peer look after each other. And we are delighted by that. We are fucking proud of that. And it's taken a lot of work, but we have people in our community who have been with us for years now, studying the classes for years now, and their spiritual offering, their volunteer work within the group that we do provide other circumstances. We look after the people who work for us. Those who moderate for us are taken care of by us as the school because we value their time, we value their effort. But for a number of them, the reason they volunteer to do that work is because they love the community. They value the community that's built up around it. And it has been a boon for them to have interactions with other people following a pagan path or following like a specific Irish pagan path, or talking specifically about a particular pagan god or goddess. So that's why the Morrigan's Cave is for Morrigan only content. Don't go sliding in there and trying to, drop a Hecate bomb or kind of, talk about Aphrodite or like any of the other deities, drop a bit of Bridget stuff in there. If it's not in context with the keeping of the group, if it's not Morrigan focused, it doesn't belong there. There's another group hosted by a friend of ours, one of the teachers in the school, the Bridget's Forge. It's great for Bridget stuff. It's focused for that particular deity. But again, all of the Irish pagan groups are for Irish pagan content, not for generic pagan content. And so, do we need to rebrand? No. But we'll take the time to consider it. We'll receive those emails where people kind of, hey, how dare that John guy talk about, toxic masculinity and how that's harming the people of our world and specifically of my island, which is Ireland, and those people who are Irish. How is that not relevant for the Irish pagan school? And the solution that I was offering within that message, because I wasn't just, ranting negatively about the circumstance. I was saying that we can do better. Men can do better for other men. And paganism can be a path to do that as we explore ourselves with introspection, with personal compassion and meditation, where we connect to the landscape around us and ground ourselves in the earth that kind of supports us. I wasn't just offering vitriol and anger. I was hurt. Absolutely. I still am hurt. But we can do better. I believe we can do better. And I believe we should do better. And I'm not a politician. I don't have a platform as a movie star. I don't have a platform as a musician. Like, the area where I have expertise, the area where I have built a community that, will hopefully have some impact in the world is my spirituality, is the teachings in the class I teach in the Irish Pagan School. And so, yes, this affects me as an Irish person. This affects me as an Irish pagan. This affects me as an Irish pagan man. And I believe that other Irish men can do better. So why would I not use the platform that I have to speak openly about that? Because not speaking about it is being complicit. That's part of the problem. When guys don't decry other guys for the acts that they do, that's part of the problem. Sure, not all men. Yeah, okay, but far too many fucking men for there to be a blinkered approach to the fact that there's a problem. And as that lovely saying goes, for evil to triumph, all good men have to do is nothing. So if you identify as a good man, do something. Speak about it. Tweet about it. Just throw a message up on your social media profile and say, I stand with women, I believe victims, me too. I support Black Lives Matter. I'm a feminist. Or, I believe men deserve better, and I believe men need to be held responsible by men. See what happens. But if you do nothing, then nothing's going to change. So, back on point. Change. Do we need to change or rebrand our school? No. I said at the start, hopefully now you understand why we're not going to change our school, why we believe it's so important to be the Irish pagan school. Because there's no one else out there doing it. Now, I'm grateful in the last year, we're actually seeing other Irish people stepping up and teaching about Irish kind of spirituality. And I'm delighted by that. Both myself and Laura are delighted by that, because our approach to this, our mentality around this, is about community, not competition. The more voices who talk about Irish spirituality, the more people who can responsibly teach about our culture, our spirituality, the more people who can actually do the work, the better. I have an amazing kind of dream in my mind, like that somewhere down the line, there will be a greater recognition of paganism in Ireland as a spiritual practice. Thankfully, to groups like PLR, the Pagan Life Rights, there is legal recognition for being pagan in Ireland now. You can have a pagan celebrant do your wedding or do your funeral, or do a naming ceremony for your child. And that can be legally supported and legally documented within Ireland, which is brilliant. Roll the clock back 5 years, that didn't exist. We're making moves. We're making changes. And we're all part of the change. Every single one of us. It might be small. It might be a small change here, a small change there. But the big changes are made up of many small changes along the way. So, or not changing those things that don't need to be changed. And so we're not going to change the name of our school. We're going to remain the Irish Pagan School, and we're going to do our damnedest to provide the best Irish-focused, pagan-centric school environment experience that we can. So if you like the Irish Pagan School, do me a favor, like this video. Maybe subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, or share the video with someone else who might like the Irish Pagan School. If you have come across people who get caught on definition or their view or their perspective of things, shout that in a comment too. Like, do you think I'm right? Do you think the Irish Pagan School is doing enough? Do you think the Irish Pagan School could be doing more? I'd love to hear from you. I'd like to kind of know more about your perspective on things and your definition of things. So thanks for connecting with us. Thanks for being around with our community. And until next time, look after yourself. And remember, you are a unique expression of humanity in this existence. There will never be anyone in this entire world who can be more you than you. So love yourself. Look after yourself. Do the work whenever and wherever you can for those outside of yourself. But remember, you're special. Take care. Till next time. Goodbye. Slán.